welcome to What's New in Electronics Live 2019. This is possibly the most contentious roundtable of the event. We're going to talk Brexit. So I've got Joe Booth, Adam Fletcher, Michael Ford and David Greenfield. Greenman. We'll let that go. We're going to make more mistakes than that, I'm sure. Well, thank you for daring to stand up and start talking about this. Brexit brings up emotions, all sorts of issues, but from a business point of view, let's look at three aspects here. What are the immediate issues people are having? Are people thinking, okay, we need to stockpile, we need to look at our supply chain, we need to look at who our customers are, where they are, how we deal with it? Indeed, can people even do any planning? But what kind of things are you seeing? I mean, Joe, you deal with a lot of different companies. What are you seeing?
So from our perspective, and I mean either way, whichever way you voted in the referendum, the impacts now already happening or what's going to happen in the future, they're undeniable really. From a first instance, we see a huge downward movement in our currency, which has already cost companies quite significant amounts. Maybe it's in competitiveness of quoting, maybe it's in the uncertainty of what's going to happen and what they invest in. But to be honest, we anticipated as a distributor of capital equipment that this year was going to be a really tough year for us. We anticipated that people would hold back budgets, wait to see what's going to happen. But in reality, what's happened is not what we forecast. So as a capital equipment distributor, we've actually seen an uplift in processes that lead to automation. So if a company is running batch processes for SMT equipment, buying a loader, unloader and a load of link conveyors suddenly gives them a huge competitive advantage to if they weren't, and drops the prices of their products or the profitability increases. The same situation for back-end processes such as THD placement or soldering or that involves very manual processes. There's a lot of investment into this area, and I think that is because either way, whatever happens, companies in the UK are going to have to become more competitive. If it's positive, we still need to compete with each other. If it's negative for our currency, for our manufacturing, we're going to have to compete harder with Europe and the rest of the world. So either way, it's just a drive to get to an Industry 4 or lights out factory faster. Make yourself future-proof depending on what politically happens. So it's a mixed bag. We'll see.
It's interesting that you've seen an uplift in those areas. I mean, do you think efficiency is a benefit, a key for people?
I think there's a couple of things that happened that Joe's alluded to. The first thing is we've seen a great change in exchange rates. There's been a 35% depreciation against the dollar, a 25% depreciation against the euro. That's made input materials more expensive, but it's enabled manufacturers based in the UK to be very, very competitive in export markets. If you can't export really well today from the UK, the exchange rates we've got, you're in trouble. Now, although the input price has gone up, the input price compared to the output price of goods is very different. It's a very small input price, a much bigger resale price. So actually, I think that's why we've seen over this period a big drive. Now we're seeing a slow off. We're seeing a slow off at the moment because the global economy is slowing. That's not necessarily related to Brexit, but we're seeing a global slowing, and Brexit uncertainty isn't helping that. We've also seen pretty well right across industry, doesn't matter whether you're making food products or agricultural products or medical products or electronics, we've gone through cycles of saying, okay, we think the date is going to be the end of March, so we've put inventory in to support that, and that what happens is you see nice revenue goes up as it goes in there. And then that didn't happen. So what happens is you get a lull because people start to burn off that inventory, and you then get another date and people start to stock up to that date. So you see a little uptick. But when this happens, whenever it happens, we'll have to go back, and that inventory will have to be burnt off, which means you're going to see the numbers go down for a while. So, that's really, that uncertainty is what's hurting industry, I think, more than anything else. I think the exchange rates are just, I think, from a personal perspective, I think they're a disaster. But if you're a manufacturer, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, for us as a software company, we have an office in Germany, we have an office in the UK. We just move things around. It's a bit of paperwork. It's hardly any effect at all for Brexit. However, for our customers, it's a massive change. And it's what you said, it's the uncertainty. But I think we need to go back to first principles. The first principle is wealth. It's business success. What drives that? And we kind of live in an economy now where it's difficult to find growth, because growth means that we consume more and we absorb more resources. We're basing economy on perpetual growth, which is unsustainable. Talk about the environment, sustainability, climate change, etc. So where else can wealth come from? Wealth comes from change. I mean, even when things go bad, people buy short on the stock exchange. Somebody is always there to make money. So there are going to be winners and losers. And that's no different from any normal week in the UK. There are always 50% winners, 50% losers. Brexit is bringing an opportunity. And I think a lot of the analysis, like what you've talked about in terms of supply chain and currency changes, networking with materials, all of these are really important things, and companies really need to figure out how they are going to be the winners as opposed to having challenges, because they're going to be both. And so really looking at Brexit as a real opportunity, as the customer base changes, as costs change, as selling prices change, there are going to be equal amount of opportunities. So you can go into this with a negative attitude that, we've got a problem, we're going to have a terrific kind of problem, or you can go into it thinking, right, now I've got the opportunity to develop my business to be more responsible for local manufacturing, to supply locally, or to become more competitive overseas even. And so we really need to balance this kind of process out and to understand what is going to positively affect us and negatively affect us. Because the day itself, assuming people don't panic, hardly anything's going to happen. It'll only be the people who panic that cause the problems. The rest of us need to look from a business sense. How can we take advantage of this fantastic change that's coming? Whether you agree with why it's happening or not, it doesn't matter. It's a change. So how do we take advantage of that?
As a material manufacturer, we've experienced both ends in that some of our raw materials we import from mainland Europe, and of course we're exporting a lot of our material over to the mainland. And prior to the 31st of March, we stockpiled our material coming in readiness for the unknown, and we've worked our way through that now, and we're stockpiling again, ready for the 31st of October. Again, not knowing what's coming. But we have benefited from the exchange rate, as you were saying earlier, that it's balanced off the increased cost of importing against the being able to sell more.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's more than balanced off. I'd say you must be pretty well positive with a 35% change.
Okay, yes, absolutely. But the problem is the unknown. What is coming? We can plan, but we can only plan for what we can see.
The other element with currency, because there's two parts. We're thinking of this from a manufacturing perspective. But within manufacturing companies, maybe we don't always admit it, but a lot of our workers and employees are actually from different nationalities in engineering. There was a huge crash that happened that people probably forgot about, where plethoras of companies closed, no one trained in engineering, there were no jobs available, and there's a gap between 25 and 35 of engineering talent. And what happened at the same time is these engineering companies went over to Eastern Europe. You've got Conti's, Bosch, these companies out here. So young Eastern European people trained in engineering, they became skilled. Our industry rose again. They came over to the UK for a higher priced job and opportunities. Came into middle management in the UK now as a distributor, speaking to loads of these managers that have authority to buy. Well, actually, the currency shift for them as an employee, if it's gone down considerably against the euro, a lot of these staff members are going back to Europe because they can live at home for a comparative price now with a high wage. Because if you look at Hungary alone, in the last 10 years, maybe wages have quadrupled. So if you go back and work in a contract manufacturer there, actually you might be better off than living in the UK. So there's also an individual problem that we might face, and I mentioned it before, but if you look at all contract manufacturers across the south and the north, most of them have job applications for process engineers and senior figures. So there might be a void in the talent that we need to supply our products or to manufacture goods. And maybe that's why the automation increase, or maybe that might be a problem for the future for increased salaries in the UK.
Salary costs go up, yeah, inevitably. Then, like you said, the uncertainty. I mean, what we know there's going to have to be trade deals struck after we leave, with a deal or without a deal. Although calling that a deal is a little bit confusing, I think, for people, because a lot of people think that deal is it, whereas actually we're going to have to go on and create trade deals with other countries. For companies that have got established trading relationships with specific countries, that is another level of uncertainty for them, isn't it? They don't know, well, are our prices going to go up? Are they going to stay the same? Are they going to come down?
I think what people's big misconception is they think that it's all going to stop. And it's not. This is whatever the changes, and if the changes that we leave, then the discussion is going to go on for an awful long time, trying to figure out what to do. And if we remain, we're also going to have to go and do some pretty serious negotiation in Brussels to get the EU to reform more along the lines that we think is the way forward. And so, whatever happens, it's going to be this period of uncertainty is going to continue. So we have to get used to this effect of constant change, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's businesses of a certain size that are going to find it hard to adapt? If you've got the resources.
I think the companies that are most at risk are probably the pan-European organisations, because they've got all the cost and all the risk and none of the reach. If you're a local company, you're trading locally, so it really doesn't matter. And if you're an international company, you're offsetting your risk based on your reach. But if you're only operating within Europe, I think that's where you have a higher risk profile than perhaps other organisations.
I mean, you were saying earlier on, Michael, that take the iPhone as an example. Was it? What was the percentage of the actual?
1% of the cost of an iPhone retail is the manufacturing cost.
If we could bring that manufacturing to the UK through efficiencies, through automation, AI, whatever, there's an opportunity there, isn't there? But it takes balls to grab that.
Yeah, I mean,
basically.
the irony is that it takes investment. So people have to buy machines or buy software or buy whatever they need to do. And as soon as you want to put the justification together to buy something, it's what's it for? Can you show me the ROI on this? But when you've got a situation where we're not sure what's going to happen, or at least in what order things are going to happen, then that request to buy something just gets rejected. So it's really hard actually to invest in something when you don't know what's going to happen. And so it's hard to make people get to the level where they're prepared.
So,
no, I was just going to say, thinking logically, if I was an international CEO of a company that had global manufacturing sites, it wouldn't necessarily be my first choice to put a new plant in the UK right now.
It might be if you look at the exchange rate.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's the way of thinking. Yeah.
And that's true. But with the uncertainty, there's pluses and minuses, right? It would be difficult to say, but the way that it's going forward, it might be.
I think the problem is if you look at exchange rates are fundamentally an economic measure of what the world thinks the economy in your country is worth. Yeah, and I think the problem isn't going to be now with the low exchange rates. I think the problem's going to be is when the exchange rates start to normalise, because I think we would all agree that they're away from normal now. You know, a normal euro exchange rate's around about €1.40 at the pound. You know, it's not 1.18. A normal exchange rate, the dollar's around about $1.50 at the pound. It's not $1.22.
Right.
So these things are going to normalise. Yeah, over time they will come back, and I think as we come back, that's when we're going to have a bigger problem, because it will mean we're less competitive in the market than perhaps we're seeing today. And so, you know, that luxury of the additional margin that we had and were able to make, will go, and we're going to have to become much more efficient. So I think that the trick today, and I think that's probably what some of your customers are seeing, saying, let's get in, let's automate, let's make the investment, let's get ready, because we're going to have to be better in the future.
Well, we have a precedent. I said precedent, not president. But you know the guy in the US? He put like 20% tariffs on goods coming in from China. So we know what's going to happen, because what happened was the Chinese got clever and they simply devalued their currency by 20%. Oh, that's interesting. So people in the US buy the goods for exactly the same price as they always did. Oh, and by the way, in Europe, we now get them 20% cheaper. And we see actually a lot of business opportunity coming from China as they are reacting to this change. But they shored up their loss by simply adjusting the exchange rate. So this exchange rate, a whole subject is really, really interesting. So there will be a short-term knee-jerk reaction to get things stable, and then there will be a longer period of adjustment. But again, it's who is going to be riding that as a positive thing rather than simply worrying about it.
So, I mean, David, if you're a business that was dealing mostly with Europe at the moment, and you had an office, say, in France, an office in Germany, would you just simply move your centre of operations to be there? Or is that trying to hedge your bets too much, do you think?
Well, we are in a lucky position that we do have a facility in France. We have a sales technical office plus storage. So depending, again, it's looking at the unknown. Where do we go? What do we do? What do we plan? At the moment, we're just planning to maintain production in our Winnersh site in the UK and continue to supply into Europe. Now, which way that supply will go depends on what arrangements are made, if any, by the 31st of October. Nobody knows, so how can you plan?
Yeah.
And there are lots of benefits to being in the UK over France or Germany. I mean, labour legislation, is hugely different. And so the cost adder for an employee in France is nearly 40%, whereas that cost adder in the UK is under 20 now. So there's lots of reasons why you would want to do this. I can understand why banks needed to move. Banks needed to move because they need to have passporting rights. If they can't trade, they're stuck. But I think, most of us aren't in that position in the electronic components industry. We're able to trade almost anywhere. It's whether we're trading as efficiently as we might be able to.
And, like as you said, I think we should have probably set up a crystal ball in between us here. That would have been as much use. It's been very civil, actually. I'm surprised no one's raised a voice yet. I'm impressed. The
point is, we're all businessmen. We're not
exactly.
politicians.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But do you think, on a practical level, that brand GB has been damaged because of this? Do you think that people have? Yeah.
Undoubtedly, it's been damaged. We quite often in the UK mock a little bit Italy, because it has a very dysfunctional political system. And I think now people are looking at us at the same view. And I think we need to recover this back quite quickly, because the UK has previously been seen as very stable. And that stability makes it very attractive for people to do business with you, whether that's as individuals or as organisations.
I think that we are, seeing the German TV programs, we've been ridiculed by all kinds of people because, we can't make a decision politically. But deep down, people all over the world, this is not a UK-only thing. It's not a EU-only thing. There are trends within social living of humans in society that show that these kind of waves happen. And I think that people are looking at the UK thinking, yeah, they can't make a decision, but aren't they brave about being one of the first to actually address this and to take it, head on? And a lot of people are waiting to see what the result is. I mean, I wouldn't want to counsel anybody on what their opinions may be one way or the other, but at least it's out in the open now, and we know what we're dealing with. We are dealing with a division within society, which is a politically driven one, and it directly affects business and people's lives. Sooner or later, we were going to have to face it, and I think the world will respect us for being one of the leaders in doing this.
And I'd also, to add to that, I mean, the vote was so close within society. It was going to be difficult to debate and get a majority in Parliament. We were never going to come out smelling of roses of this debate, because either way, people are slinging mud at each other. And one of the sectors that has really benefited from the whole topic is news. There's probably never been such high ad revenue on news organisations, I'd imagine.
And banks. Banks have done very well, thank you very much. They win either way. But I agree, and I think we might see quite a fundamental change in UK politics. This idea of first past the post, and fundamental, just a very small majority rule, I think might start to be questioned a little bit. If you look at how they do it in other countries where they have a proportional representation system on something like this sort of vote, that have had to have something like 75% of the population say we want to do it to even start the ball rolling. So you can begin to wonder whether is this right or wrong? But I don't know, and everybody has to think about that.
This is not just a political thing, but it also gets back to the technology. I mean, seeing what we saw for the US election and even for the UK vote, social media has a huge impact, and the targeting using technology for people who are kind of not made up their minds and being able to influence these particular people, it is shocking the way that was able to happen. I mean, media outlets have a responsibility for the truth and not necessarily to have their opinion as part of that, but we've seen the complete opposite be the majority influencer, where people are getting their information from Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and it's just wrong that things that are not true can be said in an open forum and are believed. This is something we need to take into account, and maybe the proportional representation is one thing, but one way or another, that will have to change before we can do something serious again.
The social media is a relatively new phenomenon, and people have got to get used to it. And I think over a 10-year cycle, this fake news and information will go away, because ultimately people recognise where the truth is.
You would hope so.
And they look, and this is why despite protestations for many years that print media will go away, it doesn't, because people want to read something that somebody who has some good knowledge of the subject has written and thought about and given some credence to. And so I still think that I think it will come back. We're just seeing it's just swung too far one way, and the pendulum will come back to a more normal system.
I hope so.
Do you believe that the younger generation that are into the social media, will they literally begin to understand that a lot of the...
the right guy to address this to.
I think that given the recent scandals, what's happened with several companies that have been caught in this, I think the awareness level of what is real information and fake information, I don't think it was there at all before. Cambridge Analytica obviously completely utilised this fact, but it's known that there's also other entities globally that have accounts setting up split accounts that are their only aim is to polarise our democracy. And I think it's worked. It probably worked in America. It definitely worked here. I don't think we might have done that to ourselves anyway, given the way that the tabloids report about Europe and how they've changed the shape of our bananas and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But we might not have necessarily done that to ourselves. But in the opposite part, although we're talking about items to do with kind of how we're manipulated, I don't think that global businesses see our politicians necessarily reflecting the other business leaders in the UK. And I think there's a huge distinction between the business leaders that talk sense, get on with it, adjust, find opportunities, and politicians that are talking about the issues at hand that maybe haven't even worked in industry. They've never run a profitable business. They've
gone straight from university into politics.
I think we also, to a degree, are undercalling the younger generation. They're actually a lot more tech savvy and a lot smarter than us. We're just cynical. Right? They haven't got there yet. Yeah. But they're learning. They're learning what's going on with social media and adapting their behaviour to it. Stuff that you put on social media will be there forever. They've suddenly woken up to showing me being drunk in the middle of town at 2:00 in the morning probably isn't a very good thing to have on my profile somewhere. So I think people they're getting educated about what to put on it, and I think that there'll be again over time an understanding of how you use this more moderately and more responsibly.
I think that we've seen signs of this from young people already, getting involved in politics directly and not believing all of the rubbish that's gone before. Gun control in the US, the young people are leading that, climate change. I really respect all of those people who have really made a push, mainly the younger generations, to push for these things. And I believe that they really are educated in now, having seen what's happened in various mistakes that have been made, or at least things that have happened. And I too have a very positive outlook for how the younger generation should be given more opportunity to drive things in the future, based on their ability to filter out all of this nonsense that somehow a lot of people got taken advantage of.
It goes into the information you get. I think what we've learned from the recent situation is that you can't focus your input of data from one avenue. You need to have a broad selection of information from opposite sides, and I think at least what I feel like I've been educated in is to try and find centre ground, and just because you believe in one thing that one party believes in doesn't mean that you have to conform to all of the beliefs.
And I think the good news is that whilst some democracies might mock what we're doing, compared to a lot of dictatorships, we're in a whole lot better position, and at least we're able to have a healthy debate. Even if it doesn't resolve things, we're able to have a healthy debate and argue amongst ourselves about it, and not be able to make some decision in the future rather than being told what we're going to have done to us, which would happen in many other places.
And I think that, the other thing I would take from all of this is that people have quite short memories. Once we're through, I say once we're through it, we'll be here next year again talking about, and we'll be in exactly the same position, won't we? But
when will the date be then?
Yeah. Once we are through this, I think people's memories are short. So if there is damage to GB as a brand, it will be short-lived, hopefully. And like you say, people differentiate between the political system and the business standards of a country and the business ability of a country. This debate will never end, but thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Basically, Joe, it's up to you to sort it all out. Is that
right,
okay?
Yeah. Quite. It's down to you, Joe.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.